When sailors see something odd on the horizon, they turn their ship to check it out. But once they realize what they're actually looking at, it's already too late to escape safely. The day started like any normal day on the Sea Revenant, but Ethan Moreau, the youngest and most watchful crew member, felt something wasn't right that morning. He couldn't ignore the worried feeling in his stomach. His keen eyes noticed something moving far away, a dark spot on the water that shouldn't be there. At first, he thought it might be just a shadow from a cloud, but as he kept watching, he became more sure. Something was definitely there, breaking the flat line of the horizon. "Captain!" Ethan called out loudly across the deck, interrupting the usual crew talk. Captain Alden, who had sailed for many years, turned toward him. He looked where the young man was pointing. "There's something weird out there, sir," Ethan said, his heart beating fast. Alden narrowed his eyes, carefully scanning the distance. He was someone who trusted his gut feelings and his crew, and knew better than to ignore someone as observant as Ethan. After a moment he saw it too, a slight disturbance in the water, something unusual. Alden called over his first mate, Owen Blackwood. The two men stood at the ship's edge, watching the strange shadow far away. "Looks like land," Owen said, but he sounded unsure. "But there shouldn't be any land for miles in this direction." Alden nodded. The maps were clear. This area was open ocean, nowhere near any known islands or shallow spots, but the shadow was clearly there. Something existed out there. "Let's go toward it," he commanded. His curiosity sparked. He wasn't one to ignore strange or unexplained things, and something about this shadow pulled at his mind. As the ship changed direction and moved closer, Ethan felt worry growing in his stomach. Whatever was ahead didn't seem natural. As they got nearer, the sight became more bizarre. What first looked like land was clearly not solid ground. Instead, it was a mass of floating debris. A field of pumice stones, gray and full of tiny holes, gently bobbing on the ocean surface. It stretched as far as they could see, a vast, creepy expanse that made no sense. Eliza Trent, the ship's skilled navigator, came to the rail and studied the sight with concern. "It's pumice," she confirmed, sounding both amazed and worried. "Volcanic rock, formed when hot lava cools quickly when it hits water." Ethan stared at the strange field of floating stones. He had heard about pumice fields before, but never one this big, and definitely not in this part of the ocean. This sea was supposed to be calm without any volcanic activity. Captain Alden frowned. "No volcanic activity has been reported around here." "No, but it must be recent," Eliza said, scanning the horizon. "Pumice doesn't float like this forever. It must have come from an underwater eruption." The crew muttered nervously as the ship sailed deeper into the pumice field. The stones rattled softly against the hull, a sound that seemed almost alive, like whispers carried by the ocean. The water under the pumice was darker, cloudy with ash and volcanic material, creating an otherworldly scene of floating stone and churning sea. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were intruding on something ancient and powerful, something that had been hidden under the sea for centuries and was now being forced up to the surface. "Captain," Owen said, pointing ahead, "there's a clear path through the pumice." Alden looked where he pointed and saw it. A narrow strip of water free of debris, cutting through the middle of the pumice field like a road. It seemed too perfect, too deliberate, as if something, or someone, had carved it out. "Follow it," Alden ordered firmly. "Let's see where it leads." The ship glided through the clear path, with the crew growing more uneasy every minute. The sea, which had been calm just moments ago, now felt heavy and oppressive. The air around them seemed thicker, and the wind that had filled their sails earlier had died away, leaving the ship to drift through the silent waters. The sound of pumice hitting the hull had faded, replaced by a deep, rhythmic humming that seemed to come from the ocean itself. It was barely noticeable at first, but as they moved deeper into the path, the sound grew louder, more insistent. It was as if the sea was vibrating with some unseen force. "What's that sound?" Ethan asked, barely whispering. The sailors exchanged anxious glances. The noise was unsettling, a deep, throbbing vibration that appeared to rise from the ocean's depths. It resonated throughout the vessel, causing Ethan to shudder. Captain Alden stood firmly at the wheel, his expression strained with worry. Having spent most of his years at sea, he had never encountered anything like this. The ocean was unnaturally quiet, the atmosphere too motionless. It seemed as if they had drifted into a place where the natural laws had been somehow altered. Then, suddenly, the daylight began to fade. The bright blue sky above transformed into a deep, menacing charcoal color, as though a storm was approaching. Yet there were no clouds visible, no indications of rainfall or breeze. It was as if the brightness itself was being drawn out of the world, leaving only shadows behind. Ethan's chest thumped rapidly as the vessel pressed forward, deeper into the mysterious unknown. The temperature dropped, and the humming grew more intense, filling the quiet with its bizarre, unearthly tone. "We don't belong here," Eliza murmured, her voice trembling. "Something isn't right." As the vessel sailed further into the strange, darkened waters, the surface beneath them started to move. Initially, it was barely noticeable, a soft ripple in the otherwise calm ocean. But quickly the swells increased, becoming more aggressive. The ship swayed from side to side, the crew fighting to maintain their balance as the sea transformed from peaceful to turbulent in mere moments. "Captain!" Owen yelled, gesturing toward the distance. "Look what's happening!" A massive plume of vapor and cinders erupted from the water ahead, soaring into the atmosphere with a thunderous boom. The sea boiled around it, the water bubbling and sizzling as if it had come alive. Molten rock flowed from the ocean depths, solidifying rapidly as it contacted the water and forming hard stone within seconds. A fresh landmass began to emerge from the sea, its rough edges glowing crimson with molten lava. "We're witnessing a volcanic eruption," Eliza remarked, her voice filled with amazement and dread. "We're observing the creation of a new island." The crew watched in stunned silence as the island continued to expand, its molten center cooling into solid rock before their very eyes. The vapor and cinders filled the sky, blocking out the sunlight and casting an eerie reddish glow over everything. The air was heavy with the scent of sulfur, and the warmth from the eruption was nearly unbearable. The island rose ever higher, its sharp peaks stretching toward the heavens. It was a fierce, disorderly process, yet it held a certain beauty, displaying nature's raw, untamed power. Despite the wonder of the island's growth, Ethan couldn't dismiss the feeling that they were witnessing something far more dangerous than a simple volcanic eruption. The hum that had filled the air earlier had now become a deep, resonant vibration, and it seemed to be emanating from the island itself. The island's formation was nowhere near complete. As the landmass continued to rise, the surrounding sea grew increasingly violent. Waves crashed against the ship, launching spray high into the air. The heat from the eruption was intense, and the smell of sulfur and burning stone filled their lungs. Chunks of pumice, some as massive as boulders, were hurled skyward by the force of the eruption. raining down around the ship with frightening precision. "We need to escape this place," Owen shouted, his words barely audible above the ocean's roar. Captain Alden clenched his jaw as he struggled to maintain the ship's direction, but the sea was overpowering, the currents too fierce. The island's creation had disrupted the ocean's natural flow, and now they were being dragged inexorably toward the violent center of the eruption. Just as Alden was preparing to give the order to abandon ship, a tremendous tremor passed through the island. The earth beneath the waves convulsed violently, sending massive waves crashing toward the vessel. The water surrounding them churned chaotically, dragging the ship closer to the island. "The current is too strong to fight," Owen cried out, his voice frantic. "Sorry for the interruption. Before we continue with the story, I kindly ask you to like the video and subscribe to this channel. It is very important for us. Thank you very much." The once peaceful sea had transformed into a churning cauldron, boiling with volcanic debris and ash. The ship groaned under the pressure, the wooden planks creaking ominously as it was tossed about like a child's toy in a tempest. The volcanic island grew larger with each passing second, rising from the ocean depths like a dark, jagged monument. It no longer seemed like a mere geological event. It felt sentient, and it was furious. Captain Alden's voice cut through the chaos. "Abandon ship! Everyone into the lifeboats immediately!" The crew scrambled to lower the lifeboats as pumice stones and ash poured down from the sky. The heat was unbearable, the air thick with smoke and steam. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest as he helped secure one of the lifeboats, his hands quivering as he fastened the ropes. He could sense the island's presence, a deep, pulsating throb that seemed to reverberate through the very atmosphere. This was no ordinary volcanic occurrence. They had awakened something ancient and tremendously powerful. As the crew climbed into the lifeboats, Ethan glanced back at the Sea Revenant. The ship, once a sturdy vessel, was now being pulled toward the island by some mysterious, invisible force. The island's massive cliffs rose high above them, their black surfaces shimmering with the heat of melted lava. Vapor escaped from splits in the ground, and the ocean made angry hissing sounds whenever it made contact with the hot, molten stone. The lifeboats splashed into the water, and the sailors rowed with all their strength, eager to get as far away from the island as they possibly could. But the ocean seemed to have other ideas. The water currents were incredibly powerful, pulling them toward the volcanic island despite their best attempts to escape. The odd humming sound that had filled the air earlier was even louder now, vibrating through the water, penetrating their bones, and resonating through the very core of their beings. And then, with a thunderous boom, the island started to collapse. The freshly formed landmass, unstable and ready to explode, began to break apart. The island's peaks twisted and snapped, with the molten lava inside pushing outward with tremendous force. The previously solid rock split open, causing enormous sections of the island to crash into the waters below. The sea boiled furiously as the molten rock made contact, creating huge clouds of steam and ash that rose into the sky. The crew members, now rowing with every last bit of energy they could muster, could only watch in terror as the island ripped itself to pieces. Lava exploded from the center, launching fiery fragments high into the air. The island, which had emerged so rapidly from the deep ocean, was now sinking back down, returning to the depths just as quickly as it had appeared. "We're dangerously close," Ethan yelled, his words barely heard above the deafening roar of the eruption. The lifeboats were trapped in the violent currents created by the island's destruction. Enormous waves, formed by the sudden movement of water, crashed into them, almost causing them to flip completely over. Ethan clutched the edge of the boat, his fingers turning white as he desperately held on. The heat from the eruption was overwhelming, and the air was filled with ash, making it difficult to breathe properly. The sailors rowed with every ounce of strength they possessed, battling against the waves and the powerful pull of the disintegrating island. The water surrounding them was cluttered with floating debris, pieces of pumice, chunks of lava rock, and ash, all swirling chaotically in the violent currents. Yet despite all this mayhem, Ethan felt a curious sense of peace wash over him. He realized they had been fortunate to survive this long. The island's collapse was inevitable. It had been created by the powerful forces of Earth, and now those same forces were reclaiming it. The ocean had given life to the island, and now it was taking it back to itself. And then, as abruptly as it had all started, the island vanished completely. With one final, earth-shattering roar, the island disappeared beneath the waves, leaving behind only a bubbling sea and a dense cloud of ash. The crew, battered and completely drained, drifted in their lifeboats, staring at the spot where the island had once been. "It's completely gone," Owen said, his voice trembling with emotion. "Just like that, it disappeared." Ethan gazed at the water, feeling a heaviness in his heart. The island, with all its incredible power and mystery, had been consumed by the sea, leaving absolutely no evidence that it had ever existed. The ocean was peaceful once more, as if the entire event had never taken place. Captain Alden, seated in the lifeboat next to Ethan, looked out toward the horizon. "Nature provides, and nature reclaims," he said in a hushed voice. "We were never supposed to witness that island's existence." In the days that came afterward, the crew of the Sea Revenant was rescued by a ship that happened to be passing by. They shared their extraordinary tale with the authorities, but very few people believed them. An island that was born from the depths of the ocean, only to be destroyed mere hours later. It sounded like something straight out of ancient myths and fantastic legends. But Ethan understood the truth. He had witnessed the island with his own eyes, experienced the power of the forces that had both created and destroyed it. The memory of that strange humming sound, the vibrating energy that had permeated the air, remained vivid in his mind. It was almost as if the island itself had been alive, and they had somehow disturbed its slumber. Scientists later confirmed that an underwater volcanic eruption had indeed occurred in that area. Similar to the Home Reef eruption near Tonga, it had produced a temporary island, visible from space for a brief period before it was reclaimed by the ocean once again. However, nobody could provide an explanation for the strange phenomena the crew had experienced. The humming sound, the vibration, the overwhelming feeling of something ancient and immensely powerful awakening from its long, undisturbed sleep. The crew members of the Sea Revenant eventually returned to their normal lives, but they were forever transformed by what they had witnessed. The sea, once familiar and seemingly predictable, had revealed its true, awesome power. It was a realm of endless mystery, a powerful reminder that there exist forces in our world that are far greater than human comprehension can grasp. And although the island was gone forever, Ethan knew with certainty that neither the vast ocean nor they themselves would ever truly forget what had happened that day. Did you enjoy this story? What would you have done if you were on that ship? Let us know in the comments below. If you liked the story, subscribe to this channel and leave a like. Nature is powerful, mysterious, and not always meant to be understood.